Morning, and we appreciate you taking the time to give us on the strategy huddle today. My name is Ryan, and I'm an account manager and product manager for MyStrategicPlan. As always, the purpose of the call, the strategy huddle, is to talk strategy, to talk execution, and really to address some real-world questions and provide some ideas and actionable solutions. So, quick ground rules. Presentation is targeted for 45 to 60 minutes. And we definitely encourage your participation. If you identify yourself with a topic or a question, or you have a question, please use the chat box on the right-hand side, or raise your hand, and we'll open the floor to you to address any of those questions. We're also going to email a copy of this presentation with a link to the recording. We get that done by the end of this week. And it's just important to note that this is not a rehearsed presentation, so we're always on the fly, moving quickly on these, taking the questions from you, the participants, and putting together this presentation, and we appreciate your time on that. On that note, based upon the survey and the feedback last month, 85% of the people liked the deep dive, diving into a single topic, and liked the idea of doing it again this month. So we thought it was a good idea to given the timing of the strategy season for many, we're going to do that again, and I'm looking forward to hear your feedback on that survey that we're going to send on the post call, and gauge interest for next month's topic and how we're going to structure that. With that said, I will get ready to turn it over, get the strategy huddle started, but I'm going to take a minute just to introduce strategy huddle leaders, and that is Howard and Cammie. One of our team members that you are familiar with on the strategy huddle is Erica, and she's actually out traveling on business today, currently on a plane. So today we're going to have Howard and Cammie, as I mentioned, and Howard is a co-founder of M3 Planning, which is the parent company of MyStrategicPlan and the brains behind the intellectual property of the system itself. He is a president of M3 Planning and also has a PhD in marketing with the emphasis on research. A lot of our work on the strategy and the research side of the business is driven by his direction. Cammie, she's one of our senior account managers on our professional service side of the business and has a strong focus on research as well, specifically tying customer feedback to the planning. We received a few like-minded questions again on the topic of today's topic, environmental scan, and a reason why we pulled Cammie in, given her expertise in that area. Both Cammie and Howard are involved with MyStrategicPlan system day to day, but they're also on the road considerable about facilitating and working with the customers and clients. With that said, I'll turn the call over to Howard, and we will get this started.
Thanks, Rye. Good morning to everybody. Hello, Cammie, and
good morning.
Appreciate all folks, as Ryan said, joining us today. And as Ryan said, we do this stuff day by day. We are a business. In this environmental scan information we're talking about today really affects us in our business, as well as working with clients across the United States. We happen to be in Reno, Nevada, where the environment economically is fairly atrocious, if you want to say. We lead the nation in unemployment, so we're really into doing this on a practical side. So this environmental scan stuff is really important. It's something that we all talk about. We've heard about it, and we wanted to bring a little bit more practicality to it and get some additional feedback on this. And also, it just seems like stuff keeps coming back to us. If you remember, 2 months ago, we were talking about the casualties and the heroes, Ryan, and those were the ones that wanted to be disruptive or lack of disruptive in their marketplace, and they were planning and taking care of what was going on in business, being proactive. Well, this is a key part of working towards being that hero. So if we remember just a basic thing I just want to revisit, the reason we do the environmental scanning stuff is because in strategic planning, we're trying to match what the abilities we have in our company and skills to what's going on in the marketplace. It's a key part of what we're doing. So we've got to learn to keep our finger on that. And with the fast-moving marketplace, we need to figure out how to see what that looks like. So today we're going to do a brief overview. We've got a little bit of a case study in a couple of situations. We've got a couple how-tos of situations that we've picked up. But as we're going through this, I appreciate there's a lot of folks that are participating with us today. They've got to have some good ideas to pop ideas into us as we go along and share their wisdom. So sharing wisdom starts out with this strategy stat, and I thought Cammie would be a good person to discuss this, so I appreciate your insights on this, Cam.
Okay, great. Yeah, I thought it was a great stat, taking, where we're at right now in the environment. Once we've got 7 people in a decision-making group, each additional member reduces decision effectiveness by 10%. So, I think that there's a lot of people that have to do public meetings that completely understand where this stat is coming from. We have a lot of municipalities that have to deal with this kind of dynamic. But when we're talking about organizations that are a little more insular, there's some dynamics that come into play with this stat that just sort of, I believe, need to be called out. In any organization, you have some level of cohesion. Just because you're like-minded people, and the fact that you're coming to work for the same company, you've got the same goals, there is some cohesion already. And the slippery slope on cohesion is that it quickly leads into some kind of conformity. And conformity is really based on a lot of power dynamic as well. So that's where, when you get beyond 7 people, people just sort of start to shift, and the processes of conformity take place in a rather rapid subconscious level. In worst case, in these scenarios, you get into a dynamic of groupthink, and the groupthink, there's a lot of dangers to that. The more people that might be trying to make one decision, a lot of biases start to come into play. So this is a really interesting stat in that, the 7 people mark, that's just a good definition of, where diminishing return might be on what you're trying to gather out of the people that you might have to interact with. In respect to the way that this might, be framed in the environmental scan area, environmental scans are they're big. They look externally to your organization. A lot of people take that kind of information and just sort of assume that they understand what's happening, and that kind of subjective exercise that's not grounded in data leads to the biases that lead to groupthink, that lead to the types of decision making that are reduced in effectiveness. So it's just something to be very aware of, that the subjective data that people usually have about their environment really needs to be grounded in some kind of fact. And the fact is an anchor for people to come around and know what is part of a valid decision-making process and what might be a more individual, oriented type of influence decision. So use the data. Do environmental scans to the best ability of your organization when you are looking at strategic aims, and make sure that the data and a balanced discourse is part of the process whenever you get into situations where you have more than this, this number 7 into your group dynamics. So it's a great stat for our topic today, I think. Back to you, Howard.
Thanks. So in other words, never have a committee bigger than 7. If we get bigger than that, break them into 2 and take an average. Baby.
There you go. All
right, so let's start up. Thanks for that insight, because there is a lot of good information out there, and because we're looking for the future, trying to be proactive, we're not dealing with we're not dealing with history, we're dealing with estimates. And so we're going to have to process ideas through people's mindset and perspective. And so as you're talking, Cammie, that's, we surely don't want to get in a group think. We need individual thoughts to come up with things. So from an overview, high level, we've all talked about this environmental scanning, pest stuff, so how do we even take all this information and do anything with it? There's so much stuff going on. Our environment's moving so quickly around us. So we've put this together in a little bit of a framework, and to kind of help gather this, because there's so much going on. We've got one here, and then there's another on the next page. But let me just kind of briefly walk you through this, because it does help us use all this information, how it flows together, and what we might do with it from impact in our either strategic plan or our operational activities. So we've got a lot of things going on. We're going to talk more about the environmental analysis, which is down in the left-hand corner, but we've also got the internal stuff, information flown in, goes into the old SWOT analysis we've all talked about. And then what do we do with the SWOT analysis? There's a process, you go through it and come up with different, as we got the arrow flowing down, there's strategic issues. So just, I want to not digress, but how can we use that on an ongoing basis? Because really, when it's all said and done, particularly the environment we're in, environmental analysis and so forth shouldn't be a snapshot. It shouldn't be just a still picture. This should be an ongoing, moving picture, collecting data as we're going through. So as we get information in, what do we do with it? So we've got this list of strategic issues because we've looked at these, our environmental analysis, looked internally and taking, taken record of what we've got going on. So look at strategic issues. And first step that we would suggest you to do is I would call it an impact analysis. I would go through these and say, which of these are really, really important, which of them are not too important, but they're still strategic issues. And the other thing is what the immediacy of each one. Which ones are coming right soon, which ones are out in the future, and then put all this together in like a 2x2 matrix. So where you've got on one side of the axis, you've got the immediacy, high, low, and the other side of the axis, you've got the strategic importance and high, low. So from that, everything that ends up in a high immediacy and a high impact, strategic impact box, then I would go to a scenario analysis, looking at the probabilities. What are we going to do if this happens? What are we going to do if that happens? So that then would drive a plan of where we're going. So that's how we can actually use that, and we'll revisit that as we go forward. Another framework that Erica had put in the Strategic Planning for Dummies book is this bullseye type thing. And if you stop and think, many times we feel like we've got this bullseye on our back because we've got all this stuff coming after us. So from this perspective, we got kind of three different types of environments, or as Eric calls it in the Strategic Planning for Dummies book, storms coming at us. We've got our operating environment. That's what we're going to be talking a little bit more about, the political, the economic, social, and technological aspects going on. We got our industry factors. What's going on there? Suppliers, competitors, that type of thing. And then we've got things that are a little bit closer to us, our market that we're in every day. Is it growing? What's happened to our customers and so forth? So that is another way to pull apart this environmental issues and then look at them and then start ranking them so we can maybe do something with it. So that's a second framework from a higher level that you might want to look at just to use the information. So some of the topics that you may see when you start looking at it, because there's a bunch of things going on. For example, we all see these lists, and we've got on the political side of things, and we all know just from watching TV, reading the newspapers, and everything else, government, the type of government and the stability is an issue today. Doesn't make any difference which side of the fence you come down. Businesses feel like they cannot make some solid plans because we don't know which way the government's going. So that's affecting people in their environmental scanning. So that obviously companies have processed that stuff. Another impact, for example, on the economic side, if your labor costs are going on in your area because of high unemployment, that might drive then, for example, looking at finding some really great people and adding them to your staff. One way to take advantage of that. Socio-cultural, there's a bunch of stuff going on in that area, depending upon where you are in the United States and so forth, but that's changing. The diversity of the area is changing. So how does that drive your decision making? Technology. The impact of the internet. We keep hearing the word cloud. How is the cloud going to affect what's going on in your business? Where are your applications going to live? So any one of those topics can be really intense in driving what's going on in your business, but and undoubtedly there's a laundry list and more of them there. So from that, we can pull some leading indicators that we might have that might affect our company. We're going to deal with some of these a little later on in more of the case study. But this information is all readily available. And yeah, I know it's some respects people say, well, that's academic. How do I use this and so forth? But these can be leading indicators if you start using them in conjunction with how your business is growing or changing. And we will talk about those in just a second. But all this information is readily available from the government, banking. You can pick it up. You can subscribe to it, and we'll talk about some of these other economic indicators in just a second. So let's kind of look at a quick overview here, Bri, and see what some of these trends are that might be causing these some of these trends that are coming out. You know, they might be manifested in what we've got with what's going on and the different what these different leading indicators. For example, under consumer trends, the bottom line there is less is more. And you would say, okay, what does that really mean to say? Well, if you've been reading about it, what we're finding is that consumers around the United States are saying, for the future, we're not going to spend as much. And actually, on the average, we're talking about we're going to spend 14% less. So we're going to live on 86% of what we had before. So that is a major factor for anybody in the consumer industry. The other aspect on the left side, we've got change of the local cities here, where we've got folks moving back in downtown because of they had the suburban sprawl before. Now they're saying it's taking more of our efforts to commute, costs us more. We want to live back downtown. There's more things going on. Huge opportunities for some organizations. So those are some big major global trends that you might want to start looking at that might be a benefit to impacting your proactive planning process. Where can you get some data on all this? Let me give you some thoughts. IBIS it's called ibisworld.com. We've used them, and I've got to sign up for them again because I've missed their information. They put out about 800 industry reports. Oh, they run 30, 40 pages long with forecasts in them, competitors in them, who are the main players in the in the industries, and really they do a great job. And you get a subscription. Last time I looked, somewhere about $1,100, $1,200 a year, but you can get as many industry reports as you want. Obviously, we've got census data, we've got all kinds of local government sources. We'll talk about that. Small business development centers, and which there's almost one in every state. And then we've got local business newspapers and so forth. And so there's a wealth of places you can get data. You just have to determine where you're going to find the information that's going to help you. Cammie, I suspect I've gone through this overview, gone rather quick-like. Can you bring us a little bit more perspective in another area or two?
Sure. I think that a lot of these data sources, they might seem a little remote according to the world that you might live in. And I think that there's ways to bring them closer to you. I think that, with every organization has some kind of stakeholder relationship, whether it's actually activated or not. You have people that are on the external boundaries of your relationship that can really help you in assessing how some of this, sort of separate data might apply to the world of not only your organization, but those on the periphery of your organization that might supply you with your goods and services, as well as consumer organizations and such. So I think that there's ways to bring this data maybe even just a little bit closer to home for you, and I believe that stakeholder networks are great for that. Also, in looking at something like the IBIS report, that's a dollar figure that's sort of like anything that's four figures these days, seems a little bit, something that you have to consider, especially, small to mid-sized businesses. But, consider, again, your stakeholder network. I mean, there might be people in your supply chain There might be, groups that you supply to that that could share costs. You share costs for one of these subscriptions, and you all reap the benefits. Because what it's really about in organizations, moving forward, is the ability for organizations to reach outside of their own boundaries to optimize what's going on in the environment. And you see that a lot with, businesses going into business with competitors, a lot like, the airlines have done recently. So there's all sorts of ways to use this data, bring it closer to home, utilizing a stakeholder network in ways perhaps that people haven't thought of. And that would be my input on some of this.
Thanks so much for bringing it down a little bit closer. I like your one point about the supply chain networks, because for sure you've got the people that come out and knock on your door and want to sell you different things. They're out there talking to a whole bunch of competitors, and in a local environment, they really do have a wealth of information, and a cup of coffee goes a long way with them.
Absolutely.
So, moving on to the next part of the topic, bring it a little bit closer to home, and this look at a little case study that comes out of United Parcel. And as I read these 3 points, the first one from we've got the quote there from the CEO. That reminds me of just a few months ago when we highlighted a Wall Street Journal article where the head of one of the major consulting firms said strategic planning as we know it is dead. When you dug down further in the article, we got to the point where strategic planning, as a lot of people had done it, where they came up with a 5-year plan and it was cast in granite, they didn't change anything, that kind of stuff was dead. So what the CEO from UPS is saying here is nothing's perfect. Nothing is perfect. Let us look at a range of things, and that way we are more proactive and be able to change as things happen too quickly, because the environment is just moving so rapidly around us. And we can only imagine what UPS has to go through in some of their forecasting and trying to establish their labor fleet, or keeping their airplanes up in the air, or buying fuel and so forth. So here we've got somebody that's got so many different variable costs he's looking at and trying to keep track of that thing. So he's suggesting to us is make sure we look at a whole host of possibilities. So many times we look at things through rose-colored glasses, high, low, and medium. And another way, that I suggest for people to do is almost like a cone of possibilities. High, low, medium, crank it back a little bit. And I've got this rule of thumb. I can't remember where it came from. Might have come from my mom, but I'm not really sure. But when we're starting to look at forecasts and so forth, what folks have said is however forward you're going to go, make sure you're anchored twice as far back. So in other words, if you're looking 2 years out, try to figure out what was going on behind you 3-4 years before you try to launch two years out in the future. So that'll help you ground your high, low, and medium ranges of what you're looking at. And then the third point there is look at ratios instead of fixed items. And the reason ratios are so important is because you hear a lot of times, particularly with local government budgets, they're going to cut 10%, whack everything right off the top. Well, that from a strategic standpoint, that makes absolutely no sense. Obviously, there's some areas that need to be cut. Maybe a whole function needs to be taken out instead of taking 10% from everything, because you may be hurting an area that's really truly strategic. So look at percentages and so forth, and not look at absolute dollars and whacking things off the top. Another example that we've got here of a kind of a leading indicator that is available from the federal government, and actually there's a lot of organizations that can really use this particular information. And the example here is if you happen to be in a kind of business, say you're in construction, okay, and in your local economy, and you start seeing housing starting heading down. I mean, hello, it makes good sense that we should start looking at how we're going to manage our staff reduction. So, and you're saying, well, I've got a small organization. Now, how do I do this? How do I use this kind of information? What I would suggest that you do, just from a practical standpoint, you can get this chart from the federal government, and you can plot it out for a number of years, and then put underneath it, put your gross revenue, or put your some number from your organization, maybe your employee payroll, and see if there's a lag or a lead or something like that in there that you can somehow visually correlate. So for example, you can then determine if in fact that housing starts might impact your business. If you happen to be in the numbers and so forth, and you can do this statistically through a regression analysis with a lead and lag. So there's a lot of ways you can use this. You can and this is readily available right here and now today. We've got another organization that we work with nationally that they visit this information every month because they use this to staff up their particular temporary labor force. Another example has to do with the durable goods manufacturing. And this one's just looking at percentage change and so forth. So this example, we could say, well, geez, as we see the durable goods starting to move forward, move up, it might be a perfect time, as the example we've got here says, we might want to start making sure we ramp up our sales force, because it takes 2, 3, 4 quarters to ramp people up to get them ready to go out there, or let's start buying that market. Let's get that promotional campaign ready to go out now, because we can, instead of being a day late and dollar short, we can be on the front end when things are happening, and we can get people's attention. So there's 2 more examples of how we might use it. A real local situation, we've got this slide, and the next one comes from our local government here, Washoe County, and they put this information up on the website about what they're seeing, what's happening in the environment. And so as a local business, what you can do is you can say, geez, I see right here, for example, that the vitality, according to what the county's thinking is down. Of course, this is a year or 2 back, but this is publicly available right on their website. So from a small business, maybe you've got a little cafe or whatever else, you could use this information. From a real practical standpoint, we are using this information here because we're a strategic decision we have to make here in less than a year is our office lease is coming due. It's going to be renewed. So he said that's obviously a pretty strategic issue we have to deal with. So many of us have to deal with that. So we're starting to collect information. So we go out and we look at, my goodness, we find that the vacancy factor for similar offices in town is 27%. Say, holy smokers, now what does that mean to us? The other things we look at is that the construction for new offices is flat. So I said, we take that information into account. So then we step back and we look at, well, we've got 3 possible scenarios. Negotiate with the current landlord, buy a building, so do we want to become a landlord, or we move? So we use all that information to help us make a decision, and just by doing environmental scan and determine what's the best for us and forecast it out. Cammie, there was a lot of data there.
Yeah.
Can you land it a little bit closer to home?
Well, I can land it really close to home. My brother-in-law is an engineer, and they had the same sort of scenario where their lease was coming up, and they started looking around. And it's interesting what they were able to do is, find if an office building that had a high vacancy rate for a very long period of time, and with the same amount of rent that they were paying at a subdivided technology center, they were able to actually purchase an entire building, keep the current clients, pay the same amount, and gain such an amazing physical asset like that. So when you start to look at that, and look at what's going on in your external environment, there's opportunities that might not necessarily be in the realm of where you normally operate, but they could very much enhance your company's financial health. So I think that, you look at what you knew do, day to day, your normal business, see how to optimize that. But look at ways to strengthen your organization that might be unique in today's marketplace and economic environment. Another thing that came to me as you were speaking, Howard, was a lot about the importance of the strategic execution sessions that people need to plan, or that people need to be consistent to the execution of a plan. That is the crux of what keeps strategic plans alive. And in these sessions is where you really examine these lead lag factors. And I think that an important exercise to go about when you are doing a strategic plan is to identify some of these sources, the examples that Howard has given, as they apply to your market, and identify them, make sure you're capturing that external data, and make that a part of your strategic review. And if the lead lag, data is coming at you really quick, then ramp up the frequency in which you have those strategic execution meetings. And that really is how you protect your investment that you make on strategic planning.
Wow, that was a real good wrap, but taking all those wonderful numbers that are floating around out there and really make sense of them. I do appreciate that. The kind of even bringing it a little bit more into the paper and pencil type of aspect. Let's look at using this template that we kind of talked about at the beginning. But before we move into it, there's a kind of as we got to know here, a simple thoughts about a couple different things before we look at the bigger overall template. Just from a standpoint where we're thinking about the environment with the concentric circles and so forth, one point would be to look at that information and say, what are we doing in regards to meeting our customer needs? Where this information came from was a research study that was posted up on the Harvard Business Review. It was done of 330 firms, and they found some of these simple things that we can do by going out and doing this environmental analysis and applying it. So they applied it by saying that we needed to get closer at customer needs. And what they found that is that the companies were doing this were being more sensitive to customer needs, were two times more successful at moving their growth forward. So instead of existing in strategic uncertainty because customers' needs may be changing and issues are changing, they're not spending as much money, companies are going out in front of the pack, so to speak, got the information and did something with it. The next point has to do with this innovation thing, which is a key part of strategy, and it's really hard to get your arms around so much of that because it's great. People say, "Well, I'm doing new stuff all the time." Well, the point is, are you really doing something with it? Yeah, there's a lot of ideas floating around. So what they found is in the study of the 330 firms is, in this uncertainty environment with all these different ideas popping up, if we take these ideas and we do something with them, we actually implement it, because therein lies the whole different implementation, reading that statement. If they really implement it, they're going to make a serious difference on driving the top line growth. So taking advantage of things where people are pulling their horns in, concerned about going forward, we're going to take ideas and go forward and really bring these new things to fruition. Third point is that Cammie kind of talked about earlier, collaborating. Get outside your own environment. What's going on? Even the co-opetition stuff. Let's work together with some of our competitors. If you're big enough size firm, maybe you've got a marketing department and you say, hey, we need a new campaign. And you say, well, let's write up this RFP, and let's see how well our marketing department can do compared to an outside company, and just kind of get the creative juices flowing, because taking advantage of what might be happening. So how do we then take this data and start forecasting? Because when you start thinking about forecasting, it could be really daunting. Take your key executive leaders. Talk about what might be those indicators that might be affecting your particular industry. Some of them are lead that are way out there. Some of them are not too bad. Look at them. Like I mentioned earlier, you can either do visual fitting of a correlation or even run a regression analysis. Start doing that on a regular basis. Once we get plotted and start going, it isn't so daunting because, again, it's not supposed to be a snapshot. It's supposed to be a moving picture. And then you have to determine what the lead time is. That's going to vary probably as the environment changes, but it could be 6, 8, 9 months out, maybe a little less. And then use that information to impact your financial forecasts. And so we're going to talk about the financial forecast in the next slide here, because we have to have some reason to drive what we're doing with the financial forecast. And basically what I would do with this thought, there's a number of items there. So many of the accounting programs today, QuickBooks, for example, Peachtree, they've got all kinds of scenarios, and in budgeting, you can do what ifs. You can, you're not limited to, dumping stuff in Excel and so forth, or running in paper and pencil. You can take the information you got from forecasting your economic data. We were just talking about with the lead and lag situation. Use that information in your accounting data and run different scenarios where you're going to see ups and downs and so forth. And then based upon those scenarios, how possible are those going to happen, and develop one or two different strategies you might want to take into consideration that's being driven by these different financial changes. So we can pull all this stuff together, as we talked about at the beginning, because there's a bunch of stuff happening here. Pulling your information together from the different factors, whether environmental, internal. We're pulling things from our economic data, put it in a list of our strategic issues. Then we need to prioritize those things because they're all strategic uncertainties. None of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. And then determine which ones are most impactful and which ones aren't, and then come up with a different type of possibilities that we may need to be working in that arena. Tammy, there's a number of different thoughts in here. Which one do you think would be most helpful for the people that we're talking to today that might be impactful to them?
I think that it's such, the data gets so concrete, especially when you're looking at your numbers and your percentages. And I think a big element of being able to incorporate this kind of information into your organization is to identify what is it about your processes that need to be altered and able to be adaptive to what you are seeing in the external environment. That's a real big part of the equation, because you can go out and you can find this data, you can strategize about it, you can figure out, how you start to, absorb it into your organization. But until the processes are adaptive to what you're witnessing in the external environment, that's really where the rubber hits the road on all this stuff. And that's something, every time I see something that is numbers or esoteric or, seems to be, a national source of data, I always want to pull it closer, and that's what our best clients do. They pull it closer, and they really look at it from an adaptive perspective and what really needs to happen in their organization to take advantage of the data.
Wow, I like your statement. It feels real good, pulling it closer, because some of this stuff feels so rough when you're looking at those economic data. As you pull closer to you and your organization, you say, okay, what is this stuff in it? How can I use this? What is it really meaning to our little company, our big company, our department, whatever else? Make it personal. So as a quick summary, as takeaway to this, because we've obviously covered a broad brush of information, but to make this environmental analysis work, we can boil it down in just 3 steps. Probably the 4th one there is the filter we need to look at. You say, okay, there's a lot of information going out there. How do I really do this stuff? And some of our companies that organizations I've worked with in the past, it's as informal as the president clipping some newspaper articles, putting in a file, somebody in the sales department sending information over to the CEO said that, yeah, I've heard this, and it's pretty informal. We had other situations where we've got a designated person that they spend a couple hours each week tracking this information and pulling it in. So whatever size of this or scope of this environmental scanning that you need to do, establish it and then continue it time after time, make sure it's implemented. Then look at the 3, 4, 5, maybe even 2 different kind of environmental indicators that are affecting your business, because they're out there. It may take a little bit of homework to do it, to find it. One way, if you happen to be in a good enough sized town, you might talk to somebody at your local university and give them find somebody in a marketing department or say in the econ department, and you could maybe provide a good project for one of the students there that would be real life and trying to determine which are the economic indicators that are going to affect this business and how best to use them. So once you found those indicators, then try to find those consistent sources. Sometimes they come from the federal government, like I suggested before, IBIS world, and I'm not, we don't get any kind of commission from them. There's probably other organizations out there. I just have used that, and I found it is reasonable. Cammie did make the point, though, that it is $1,000, 4 figures, and it is a decision that you have to make, and you're going to get a return on it, but there is information out there. And to drive the stake in the ground on this is because this world is changing so fast, so rapidly. We either going to try to be on the front end and be proactive and use our strategic plan to take advantage of things and be the hero, or if we're not, we're going to end up being the loser, and who knows how far down we go that slippery slope. So, and revisit that article again. But the bottom line is, the so what? There's a lot of information here. What's it going to do? What is it going to do? How is it going to affect? Look back, a number of years to see, okay, how can I project this going forward? So what? How is this going to make any kind of difference to us as we move forward in today's environment, because it is just so crazy out there. So you heard me, you heard Cammie, with a number of different ideas and thoughts. Limited, obviously. From our perspective, there's a ton of other ideas out there. If there's anybody else that would like to share things with us, I would really be welcome that, because there's many folks that could use the wisdom of the crowd.
And Cammie, did you have anything else? Otherwise, I do have one statement from a customer. We'll go ahead and see if you have anything to wrap up the discussion that we've had.
Well, sure, I'll add now. I'm just going to mirror what Howard just said. One of our clients we're engaging with right now currently, their COO stated it best that the opportunities are large and fast-moving, and these guys are an organization that's really looking to the external environment. I know that it's been a tough go-around for so many of our customers, so many of our clients in the past, few years, and there is momentum. There's definitely some momentum, and I hope that you all that are participating today feel it to some degree in your industry, but there are opportunities, and some of them are rather large, but they're fast-moving. So, it's almost like you have to slap a cowboy hat and lasso what you can lasso and hold on to being a part of, this rapidly changing environment, so you're running with it instead of getting left behind. But I'm really interested to hear what people that have been listening to us have to say now.
With that, we have one statement we can read from a customer just giving an idea on the no-cost option. It said, as a small business supplier in janitorial to regional shops, we track inventory cost level, that is what we are holding, and map to government GDP. We can then see trends and adjust purchasing decisions based upon that forecasted GDP slightly. Again, he said that's a no-cost option. I've heard of that before, more on a higher tech scale. There's a company out there, we'll have to look up the information on it, but they forecast and map it on technology in certain industries, but more so technology and the holding. So it is definitely one way to do it, and again, as a no-cost option, just an idea to map it out.
Well, that's a real practical idea, because as a janitorial supply, you can only think that the two major costs that they have are labor and all the supplies that they use. And if they're a pretty good-sized organization, and they can benefit from larger purchases because they know which way things are moving, the other costs or usage of their services, it would be true benefit. That was a great idea. Thank you for that insight.
Then we had one question that just came in here. I'm going to read it off the top here. Any thoughts on selecting the 3 to 5 key trends from the 3 circles of influence you showed earlier in the presentation? Do we focus more on the inner circle or take them evenly from all 3? I'm just going to pull up that graph here for everybody to see, and Howard or Cammie, turn it over to you.
Well, I'll start out with that, and then I'd like to have Cammie's insight on this. I guess in my situation, I'd be concerned more about the size of the business. If you're obviously a pretty small organization, then I think that I would be spending much more of my time on the third one in, the closest one to me, my marketplace. I would be focusing on that substantially, and then maybe secondarily I'd be looking at my operating environment. But I don't know that I would focus on each one of those evenly. I would probably have to determine where I find myself, the size of the organization, how geographically dispersed I am. But because of being customer focused and so forth, and how important it is for us to really stay close to our customers, I would put most of my bet on the inner circle.
I don't want to give away the company or anything, but it does look that the email address registered on it was an education. Was that change anything, given that you said geographic footprint? It appears to possibly be a little bit more local. Don't know that for sure, but wanted to throw that in the mix.
Well, yeah, I would think that the more local we can, because, for example, what we find in education here in the Reno area, we have substantially high unemployment. Because unemployment's high, what happens is people can't find a job, so they're borrowing money and going to school. So we've got record employment in our local higher education institutions. So, yeah, I would really focus then on primarily on my local, and then a little bit about what's going on in the larger environment, what's happening economically.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is that you have to look also at the promise that you're making to your customers. And if that promise includes being able to be at the forefront of technology trends for your customer, or some of those operating environment dimensions, that you've got to look at your value proposition, and you've got to go out from the concentric circle to be able to make sure that you're aware of what's happening as it impacts your customer, and as it impacts the value that you deliver to them.
Bottom line is, if we're not delivering value, no matter what the environment is, we're on the short end of the stick. I appreciate those 2 questions, because I just have this sense that this environment is just heating up and changing so rapidly that for those of us that want to really stay attuned to things and move with it, it's becoming harder and harder to do that. And I liked your comment from before, Cammie. Reach out, find other folks that you can share things with, and and go down that journey together. Any other insights, Ryan?
That was it. So we could go ahead and wrap up here. Next strategy huddle is scheduled again for the same time, 9 a.m. Pacific, next month on October 27th. If you have any questions that you'd like to submit for that huddle, go ahead and send them to us at admin@MyStrategicPlan. We're always interested in building the topics based upon what you want to discuss. And also we're interested if you want to break it out to 3 topics or do another deep dive. We will be sending out a survey post-call, so you can add your feedback there. And if you're interested in sharing any best practice as a strategy leader, whether it's a 2-minute discussion or a 5-minute discussion, I have a full topic. We'd like to open the floor up to you as strategy leaders. There's a lot of great minds out there and a lot of great ideas. So we're always interested to add you in here and share it with the community as a whole. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We're always posting some ideas out there, some feedback. And today's session is recorded and will be followed up with an email and a link to the presentation as well as the recording. And with that said, definitely appreciate everybody's time. Cammie, Howard, great presentation. We hope everybody out there found value in it. And we, again, appreciate your time and your support of the Strategy Huddle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cammie.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye now.